I feel like now I've kind of got the hang of this whole thing
Yeah,
based on all the
it's not so bad.
conversations
Yeah.
that I've continued to have. Yeah. I just did a book club earlier this week, so it's nice and fresh.
Once you get used to hearing your own voice, it's
Ugh, I really try not to listen to myself after because
yeah,
it's so
I've had
cringy.
guests say the something similar. Me, I have to because I'm editing it, but you do get
Yeah.
you get used to it eventually. But I know that like maybe the first year I was doing this, I'm like, oh, is that how I sound? But
I like the way you sound. I think you've got a great
good,
voice.
good. I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
This is Andrew Whitstead, and you are listening to Heavy Bored, and we're recording this on September 12th, 2025. My guest today is author Claire Isenthal. Claire is an Indiana native, graduating from Purdue University. She worked in the tech industry, marketing, and advertising for over a decade. But Claire's success as an author makes her an unusual story in publishing, or perhaps, hopefully, a more common one. Claire's first novel, The Rising Order, was published in 2023 and became an Amazon bestseller. And that's because she published her debut novel, Her Way, self-publishing. A theme on this podcast, this new world of freedom that is opening up to writers. And Claire excelled at it. And her most recent novel, the sequel to her first book, was published this past April. This latest book, titled The New Order, is the final installment in a two-part series of dystopian thriller novels, all self-published and self-marketed, with the years of accumulated knowledge from Claire's work in advertising. She owns and operates a Substack page called Rising Talent, which is linked below, dear listeners, where authors share their story of the often fraught journey to publication. And I am thrilled to welcome her onto Heavy Board to share her journey with all of you out there. Claire Isenthal, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation. I've been looking forward to it.
Fantastic. The question we always start off with all artists and writers here, we have to ask, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? How did these early years start to form Claire?
Ooh, what loaded question.
Yeah.
Well, how did Claire start to form? The storyteller in me, I would say, began when I was as I don't know, early days, as young as I can remember. And I would always tell my mom stories when I was a little girl, and she would write them down for me, and then I would often illustrate them. Um, and we moved around quite a bit. So my dad started working. I was born and raised in the Indianapolis area, a suburb of Indianapolis. And then my dad got a job at Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company. And so we actually moved abroad to England for 2 years. Um, and that really fueled my love and passion for travel at a very early age, and my exposure to other cultures. And it was something that my parents really tried to continue to instill in us as we got older. And, I remember living in London, and we went to an American school, and all the kids in my school got to go to Disneyland, France, or Paris. And I always wanted to go to Disneyland Paris, and my parents were like, absolutely not. Not against all of those people who love Disney. I know there's some hardcore lovers out there, but they were like, when we're living in England, we're not going to be spending our time going to Disneyland or Disney World. So, and then when we moved back to the US, we moved to the Washington, D.C., Virginia area. And then I lived there actually. I know you mentioned the date of our recording, but since we're a day after 9/11, that's where I lived when the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon were hit. So I vividly remember leaving school because so many of my classmates had parents that worked at the Pentagon,
Right.
and we didn't have school the next day. Like there's just some core memories from living there. And then eventually we moved back to the Indiana area, and I lived here until I went to high school, and then went to college at Purdue, and moved myself up to Chicago before moving back here during the pandemic. So what a life us millennials have led,
Yeah.
right?
I was gonna ask where in the Virginia, DC area did you
McLean.
McLean? Okay. So the
Yeah.
northern part there, yeah. 'Cause I'm from Baltimore
Yeah.
originally, so that's I know that area. My wife's from southern, pretty much south of DC there, southern Maryland area.
Got it. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a small little hood up there. Like I feel like everybody in those states kind of know
yeah, yeah.
the towns,
It's
they
just
feed into each
interesting.
other.
And then 9/11, okay. 9/11, you were right
Yeah.
in the heart of it. Yeah. That was something I
Yeah.
think millennials specific. I mean, obviously everybody older than us remembers it too, but everybody younger than us doesn't understand like that day and what it was too, with the kind
Hmm.
of yeah, everything stopped. There was announcements over the loudspeaker at school, no matter where you were in the country, essentially. And like they were
Yeah.
like closing schools, and then everybody turned on the news that the teacher wheeled the TV in or stuff. And you were like, I was in
Yeah.
sixth grade at the time, so I
Yeah.
was like, yeah.
Same. We
Okay, so
must
we're
be
the
the
same
exact.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 35. I'm about to be 36 here, but
I just turned 36. So yeah.
okay. Are
Yeah.
you a Virgo?
I'm a Virgo. Are you a Virgo?
I am, yeah.
When's
So,
your birthday?
the 21st.
Okay. My husband's is the 18th. So
Okay, yeah. There you go.
yeah.
And
But it was
my daughter
interesting.
is too. Yeah, she just had her first. Yeah. So
Oh,
she's a
she
Virgo as
did?
well. Yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
that's my son is a Libra, so he just missed our cusp.
I know the best one.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's interesting reflecting back now on pivotal moments of life history like 9/11 when there was no social media, like
Right.
how an event like that resounded through the world without social media carrying it. You know what I mean? Like,
If it had happened during social media, it would have been a disaster. Like it would
I
have
mean,
been, yeah.
what would have happened? I don't know. I
I
truly don't.
Yeah, maybe the same stuff, but I don't know. I mean, it would have been such a magnifying glass over every little thing. When the
Yeah.
Patriot Act stuff broke, when the Snowden leak, and then
Yes.
Greenwald writing about it. That was years after the 9/11
Yeah.
thing. So maybe that would have happened right. I don't know. I don't know if we would have known about it sooner, or maybe it would have dragged on as long, or I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe it would have been more traumatic, quite frankly.
Yeah, or maybe it would have cost more elections or something. Like maybe Bush wouldn't have gotten a
Yeah.
second term. I don't know if that, yeah, who knows? Who knows? What could have, would
Yeah.
have, should have, what would have happened. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
interested in the social media and I want to talk to you about it too, because millennial, we straddle this line in the culture
Hmm.
where we remember the world pre-social media, and then
Uh-huh.
we also are very well versed in the world post-social media. So almost like a translator, especially for, I have boomer parents and stuff. Whenever something happens, I'm like, feel like I'm a translator for like what's happening, what people are
Yeah.
saying, where they got that information from.
That's
Uh,
so well said.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a
Yeah.
weird place that we find ourselves in now all of a sudden. But
Hmm.
uh, so okay, so you said you grew up all over the place. You had to travel because of your dad's. Or what did your mother do? Did she was stay-at-home
She
mom
stayed
or
at
what?
home.
Yeah,
She stayed at home. And now it's interesting timing for her because she actually ran for the congressional seat in Indiana at this last election. And she wants to run again. And so you're never too old to pursue your dreams,
yeah, yeah,
listeners.
absolutely.
So she's always been somebody who is a ferocious reader, whether it be, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And she has a passion for that. And she is the true definition of a civil servant and, unwaverable integrity.
Right.
Um, and I'm not just saying that because she's my mom. It's almost to a fault, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't really know if those are the types of people that should be in politics, but obviously we know that's not the case,
You
no
get
matter
eaten
what.
alive. Yeah. If you have
Yeah, no
integrity,
matter
you're gonna
what
get
side
eaten
you're
alive.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, she's in this to help her constituents, not for any sort of other agenda. And she, like is fundraising from the grassroots, and it's just really remarkable to see her out there giving it her
Right.
all.
Did
Yeah.
she do anything? Did you have any siblings? Did she do anything before she became a mother full time or
She did. She worked. That's what she worked at. I have two siblings. I have an older sister and then a younger brother, so I'm the middle.
I'm in the middle as well. Okay, so here we go, fam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just seem to just align on a lot of these key life themes.
The
Um,
synchronicities. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But she worked at where she met my dad was basically like a research institution, and that's where she worked, and that's where
Okay.
she met my father. And she had my sister, and then she had myself, and then she, like so many parents, are
Right.
trying to straddle this
Once you hit two
dual.
kids, you got to be like, I don't know, one of us has to stop working. Like,
A
yeah, once you have two
thousand
kids,
percent.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And where it's just kind of becomes too much.
At least
And
for those first couple years, yeah, before they go to school, it's yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think you start to really understand some key, very important lessons when you have children that age and multiple, is that, like, one, there's no such thing as balance, and two, you can't have it all, like you
right,
truly really can't. Like, you can't really have a career and then parent successfully, and that's kind of goes back to what I said about balance. And I know that we all try to the best of our capacity, but there's always going to be balls that drop.
right.
um so yeah,
I
I
have a
mean, we
few
do our best
questions about that. Yeah, I have a few questions about that. Go as
though.
we get
Hmm.
into yeah, balancing that sort of thing and parenthood.
Yeah.
And then obviously, since I'm a newish father, I something that's interested me too because I've had it.
Hmm.
Some you reach limits and stuff where your time is being taken where you're like, okay, like I don't have the time for this. I got to squeeze it in. Things
Hmm.
like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think also just yeah. I mean, we'll get into all that. We'll get into all that.
Yeah.
But the next question is always, when did reading and writing come into your life? You said it was always kind of emphasized by your mother and parents and all the time. And when did reading and writing
Yes.
first come into your life?
My parents, I've just always grown up reading and loving reading. And I don't really remember a phase of my life where I did not read. So, I have strong memories and favorite memories of going to the library and libraries and spending a lot of time there, and book fairs and bookstores. And I think that whenever I enter one, I just have this like overwhelming feel of nostalgia, and that's probably where that comes from. So I've always had a passion for books, and today I actually volunteer at our library on our fundraising guild, and it's the one like nonprofit organization like in my life that I've been able to like stick to and volunteer and feel passionately about, especially at this phase of life. And so it's kind of interesting, like full circle moment for me, you know what I mean, that
Yeah.
like that's where my love of reading and thus writing started. And I do feel like that's my way of giving back to the community, is making sure there's always a space for somebody, no matter who you are, to come and enjoy a book. So,
Yeah, that too. And then, of course, we're millennials, so we have to talk about the Scholastic book fairs.
oh,
Do those still exist?
iconic.
My child isn't old enough.
They do
They
exist.
still
I don't know
exist?
what they look like now, but like now that my son, he's entering kindergarten,
Okay, so you're just
and
getting started with it. Okay,
I'm
yeah.
just getting started, I will report back. But
Yeah.
apparently, they are still things that you can volunteer. And so I will be the first to volunteer for the book fair and probably live vicariously through my children.
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia in those too, especially because you got to get out of class usually when you were going to
I
the
know,
book
and look through
fair.
the
Yeah.
catalog before, so you knew what you were looking for. And
Uh-huh.
I still can feel the paper of the catalogs.
And the little toys that we were always more interested in than the books or
A
something. Yeah, like
thousand
the little
percent.
erasers were
Rolling.
big, those little eraser caps and everything.
Yeah, the eraser caps. Yes.
And going off of that too, we always like to ask, what were some of the first writers you were enamored with, or who are your go-to inspirations or idols in the world of letters here? And
Ooh,
anything goes, anything goes.
anything goes. Okay, let's see. So, Harry Potter was my first love, I would say, in terms of, I read some of the Harry Potter books 11 or 12 times. Like the first through the third, I read at least 11 times each. And then I would say like the fourth on, as they got longer and longer, I didn't read them as much, but I just read them a number of times. And then, I was in high school when the last book came out.
Yes.
So I actually need to go back and reread those. But I would say that that was really formative for me because Harry Potter was like a world that so many people fell in love with and just saw themselves in. And even living in England at the time. Like I lived in England when my mom first started reading them to me. And my mom would read aloud to me. My mom read aloud to me all the way through, I would say like sixth or seventh grade. I would say sixth grade
Yeah.
probably. And I just almost every night, and we would sit there and listen to her. And that's something that we try to do now for my son and my daughter. Um, and so I hope I answered your question. Oh,
Yeah.
idols. Idols. Okay.
Yeah.
Back to that. Um, Anybody else? Suzanne Collins is freaking brilliant with the Hunger Games. I know these are probably very unoriginal, but um, just stories that I and characters that I fell in love with and that were probably very formative for me as an author now is like I was influenced by those characters in my young adult life. And then as an author, I wanted to write an older cast faced with what would likely be new dilemmas for those types of characters with the age and the phase of life that they were in. So I would say like those are basics. Jessica Knoll is a huge influence on me now. She is I would say she's more like psychological thriller. She kind of writes across the board. Have you heard of her?
I haven't, no. But I
She's,
don't
she's
keep up with too much contemporary. I hear about the big ones when I
yeah,
read the New Yorker reviews and stuff, but like I don't, and when it's like hyped up, I'll pick it up. But I'm usually, there's so much for me going on to read. I'm not paying attention to the newest stuff,
totally.
but yeah.
I feel that. I feel that in my very being. She has like a scathing, witty voice and she's hilarious. Like she's one of the only people who when I read her stuff I like laugh out loud and um she's brilliant. She's a brilliant writer. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think people don't understand that either because when you look on, obviously Harry Potter's huge, all of that stuff. Hunger Games is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Twilight, was that over part of it? The
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie Meyer
Loved
stuff.
Twilight. I
Yeah.
did. I have to admit I was a Twilight girly.
Well, I think that's interesting too because there was Harry Potter and then there was Twilight and then there was kind of that mad rush in publishing for kind of young adult fantasy stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see, yeah, the Hunger Games, and then you see all these other things come out. I want to ask you about that as we get to your book about
Yeah.
just, competing in that market. That's a competitive market right now. I mean, it's all competitive, but like that especially is a very competitive market. The young adult kind of, thriller, dystopian fiction stuff,
Yep.
fantasy stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I'm interested about that. But yeah, but I feel like we have to touch on Harry Potter and all of that because I think people don't understand that like as millennials, particularly millennials and for our age, like our ages lined up perfectly with each subsequent novel that was released in Harry Potter. So like, when I was the first, I think the first two were out when they came to the US. It was around
Yeah.
98 or something. So I was 8 years old. My mother
Yeah.
read me the first one because I couldn't read a book that big yet.
Yeah.
And then I think by the time I got to the third one, I could start doing it on my own. But like I remember be very distinctly being 8 years old and being like, oh man, when I turn 10, maybe a letter can come thing. Like I remember very
Yes.
distinctly thinking that. And
Yes.
like that carried, and because that book came out, like the series came out, yeah, the last one, well, Harry and everybody's 17. I was 17 when that book came out, and I was in like a senior in high school or whatever it
That
is,
is so
like,
true. I've
and
never thought about it
yeah.
that way, actually. That is so true.
You almost grew with it. So I feel like obviously it's huge, and there are a bunch of children that my nieces and nephews they're into it now that are older and stuff. My daughter's going to be into it. I'm going to be introducing to her at least. But
Mhm.
yeah, that there really is something in terms of what I'm trying to think of, like a boomer equivalent or another generation's equivalent or something. And I don't know if I could
I don't know
find
if there
one.
is,
Yeah,
and that's why it's so iconic
yeah,
now, and it did transcend so many different generations. I remember seeing adults reading the books on the planes. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And
My father and I, we all read them. Yeah, once they were
yeah,
becoming a thing.
same. And I think that's a big reason why we continued. My mom it's interesting you said, I think I read the third one on my own, but I didn't read I would say maybe I read the fourth. I think might have read the fourth one on my own, but my mom still wanted to read them aloud to us because she loved
Right.
reading them too. Um, so
And you can get
yeah,
the whole family in on it. Yeah.
yeah. And it's a shame. Like I know there's a lot of controversy now surrounding J.K. Rowling, for obvious reasons. And I find that a really big shame because she created something that spoke to so many people, and I hate that it's now very tarnished because of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I rail against the political on this podcast all the time, right? Like people are letting the political overshadow the kind of the artistic stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
such a shame. It's clouding out, and people feel like they can't love something that they love because of some dumb political. It's like,
I
shut up.
know.
Like, you can
I
love whatever you
know.
want. Like, don't listen
I
to it. You don't have to
I
listen to it.
know.
Like
A
it's
thousand
fine. I
percent.
love it. It's great. It's
And
so great.
I think we hold this double standard about like I think people have been able to separate athletes, for example, and their
Mhm.
skill from like their
Right.
personal lives and some of the decisions that they've made
Pop
for all of
artists. Yeah.
history. Like,
Yeah.
and we can't do the same here. I'm not again like just because I don't agree with her exactly like with her the hill that she chooses to die on. It doesn't mean that like I can't love the stories.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's what I say. Like, when you asked me about the podcast, I was like, yeah, it's one of the things where I saw things like that, where I saw that people were emphasizing the political almost too much. Where I was
Yeah.
seeing this and I was just like, stop. No, like, you're
Mm-hmm.
stretching. You're stretching here. These
Mm-hmm.
books were written 20 years before she ever said a statement. All right. And if you're gonna use that to say that you can't like, or you want to set it on fire for a viral TikTok or something, go ahead and do that. You go ahead and do that. That's not what we're doing
Right.
here. We love the
Right.
books. We love the stories. We love the characters. We love the impact that it had on us. The
Yeah.
cultural nostalgia. I love nostalgia. I love romanticism. I like to romanticize these things. The
Yeah.
hero's journey of Harry and all those other things. I like to romanticize it. I mean, it's what
Mhm.
gives us pleasure, meaning, all these other things out of
Joy,
it. Yeah.
different perspectives, like different points of view. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you.
But the main question I wanted to ask you about Harry Potter, as we've spent so
Yeah.
much time talking about it, is what would you say? What is it about Harry Potter for our generation, or what was it for you that kind of really kind of captured us, or makes us still captured by it, in our 30s now, middle age, and still obsessed with this, young adult book series?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you
Um,
say? And we don't need definitive answers. It's just your thoughts. Yeah,
no.
just Claire's thoughts on this. Yeah.
Claire's thoughts. I will say it's interesting because I haven't read them in a long time. Um, I just have obviously seen the movies over and over again on TV because my husband loves the movies, but my husband has never read the books, which I think is like a cardinal sin.
Is he a little
Like,
older than you?
no, he's the same
No.
age as me.
Oh,
And I
so
was
he
like,
was just deprived of the joy. Yeah.
deprived of the joy. And I was like, I'm sorry, how can you even understand what's going on?
Right. Especially when you get to those later ones with the big fat books like Order of the Phoenix. Yeah, the
Correct.
movie, they can't fit it all in, so it kind of
Yes. But
feels
one
a
of my
little
good
hollow.
friends,
Yeah.
he's reading it to his son now, and he'd only watched the movies too. And so he's now getting to experience it through his son, which is it's really cool that you can do that. And so I'm sure my husband will do the same when we start reading it to my son. But for me, I don't know if this is like a solid answer, but what always drew me back to reading them over and over again is the immense sense of comfort that I got reading them. I don't know what that was. I don't know if I'll ever be able to pinpoint what that was, but for me, it was so comfortable. Um, and I've never been able to do that with a book again, where I could just reread it over to that many times, like a book 11, 12 times.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't, other than that, like, I don't think I can exactly say, like, what maybe it was moving around a lot and that was always the same, or I just loved the characters so much. I loved the story, how easy it was, no matter how many times I'd read it, to still, I don't know, to still love it so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder. I mean, yeah, I struggle to come up with an answer to something like this too. I was thinking about it when I was like, oh, if I ask her about this, what do we? Yeah,
Yeah. What
what
do you
was it?
think?
It's kind of if I had to guess, I would say, yeah, there is something to the kind of maybe it gets to that romanticism thing. There's kind of a magical, and obviously it's about magic, but like it
Yeah.
feels magical. And they are page turners. And
Yeah.
I remember being a kid, and the reason, I mean, this is a big controversy. I'm a big Harold Bloom fan, and Harold Bloom, notoriously hated pop literature like Stephen King and Harry Potter and all that. And but I think what he always missed about that was that there is this draw to it. Like there is, I don't know. I mean, there were books that I would get assigned in school and I'd read them, and some of them I'd read pretty quickly or something if I was
Mm-hmm.
into them. Some of them are quite good. I remember reading The Great Gatsby very quickly, when I
Mm-hmm.
was assigned in high school. It's a great novel. We've
Mm-hmm.
covered it on this podcast. But I don't know. I just remember when I would get those books. So when I was reading them on my own, Goblet of Fire and stuff like that, the later books, I just remember getting them. I would read them in like 2 days, like
Oh yeah.
nonstop. I would stop everything else until I got to the end of it. And there's just something about the story. And obviously, you could say we're drawn to stories, we're drawn to mythology, we're drawn to these kind of uh things all the time, fiction, all of that, throughout. We're just humans, we're just drawn to it, campfire stories or whatever, ghost stories.
Yeah.
But then there's also just, I don't know what it was. There was a thrill aspect to it, the magical aspect to it, the fantasy aspect, the fact that this boy was kind of orphaned. I mean, that always helps. But I mean, you could talk about Oliver Twist or David Copperfield, or you could talk about these kind of other orphan stories, Jane Eyre, these kind of stories throughout history that we liked. I don't know. I mean, there's just something about the magic, something about the whimsy, the romanticism,
Mhm. I think
uh,
you're right. Yeah.
that
The
just drew
different
us.
worlds that
Yeah.
you, like I said earlier, that you kind of become immersed in. I think you're so right. And I think that's the same kind of trend with like the Twilight and the vampire and the
Yeah.
werewolves. And even now the Fourth Wing, which is becoming which was huge. And I only read the first one. I tried to get into the second one and I really couldn't, but I do see the huge draw with the dragons and then the college for dragon writers and like how could people not become enthralled by that,
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is actually gets to that. I didn't plan to ask you about Twilight too, but since we brought it up, because I think this goes in
Yeah.
the same realm with cultural phenomenon, huge
Yeah.
cultural impacts, et cetera, et cetera. There's, I mean, Stephanie Meyer's still writing sequels to these novels that she
Oh.
wrote 20 years ago. We covered the first four Twilights on this podcast, actually, but I was thinking about that. Like when Twilight came out, and especially when the movie came out, it was about 2006.
Mm-hmm.
That was This was right before the smartphones were invented. Social media existed and YouTube existed. It was not what it is today. And
Mm-hmm.
then this emo, teen, brooding kind of, romance, Mormon romance thing like came out
Yeah.
and it captured all the millennial generation. I
Uh,
remember at Hot Topic, there were t-shirts with Team Edward, Team Jacob, like, and this was
yeah.
everywhere. And I think it's tied up in the music. It was tied up in the cultural stuff. It was tied up in how people dressed when you saw those movies. And maybe it's okay, the culture was influencing, well, informing the movie more than the movie was influencing the culture. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the way they were dressed in the movie, the costumes, the kind of atmosphere, the music that was used,
Yeah.
it's very emo. That was just such a phenomenon. And I think that was like 2006. If I had to, I've said it before on this podcast, I think that was like a peak. And if you look at it in terms of, I was into emo, I'm sure you were too, because you're a millennial.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah. So we love that on this show. So if you
Yes.
look at it in
The music
2006,
are you're exactly right. Like what you dress, absolutely. The angst. The angst.
the first Twilight movie came out. Taking Back Sunday released Louder Now. My Chemical Romance released The Black Parade. I'm pretty sure the Silver Sun Pickups had just released their big thing, and it was like
Yeah.
just this huge cultural moment in 2006 that like
Uh-huh.
was, I don't know, that you can go back now. It's almost like a time capsule, but I think it had a huge influence on all of the kind of, young adult series novels that the publishing was hungry for after that as they came out. Like you couldn't write a young adult series now without grappling with Harry Potter, Twilight, The Hunger Games. I was never, I was a little older when the Hunger Games came out, so I was like, I thought the
Mhm.
first one was really good, and then the second
Same.
two were just kind of repeated this first book over
I
again.
actually didn't really read The Hunger Games until I was in college, until the first
Same.
movie
Yeah.
came out. And then I was
Yeah,
like,
same.
let me check
Yeah.
this, let me see what this is about. I had never even really heard of it.
Yeah.
But I think the movies kind of are a prime example of how that like blew up the whole franchise again,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're so right about the kind of romanticization, romanticize, whatever, you know what I'm trying to
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
say. How
Yeah.
I think that's such a part of it. And maybe that's a core part of our identity as millennials. I'm
I
having
think
a lot of
so.
epiphanies talking to you.
Well,
Like,
I
I
think
think,
you mentioned suburban living. I think that's a huge part of millennial growing up. Obviously, there
yeah,
are people that grew up in New York City and Chicago and people that lived in cities their whole life, of course, but the majority, I would say over 60% probably grew up in suburbs,
yeah,
safe environments. Usually, everybody, the Gen X and boomers always talked about the divorce rate, but most millennials I knew, very few were parents were divorced, even.
yeah,
Or you always hear about the 50 other 50%. Like, oh, 50% are divorced. You don't hear about the 50% that aren't. All right, but
yeah,
that's still majority of people.
yeah.
These
And
great,
but I do think that it's interesting because among my close friends, so this is obviously just anecdotally, we're not going to make a generalization, but a lot of my friends' parents have gotten divorced in our adult phase of life
really,
because like I don't, I think the foundation on which marriages were built on were just so different.
yeah, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
very. What do you mean by found like?
Um, I think now the conversations that I'm having with my best girlfriends, the role that our husbands are playing in our children's lives are the roles our fathers never ever did.
Right,
It was just so traditional, I think, while we were growing up. So I think that's a part of that suburban life that you're referring to.
right.
And I do think that like my children are going to be raised seeing their mom and dad work equally and take on the household tasks equally. And I could never say that of my parents. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, that has something to do with it, I'm sure, in terms of the. And I mean,
yeah,
I've seen interesting data about that too, depending on like I don't know. They've done a few studies where like there's a sweet spot to where you get married. It's usually between ages, they said between 26 and like 36. If you get married
really.
between there,
Yeah,
you're less likely to divorce. And they're like, why is
yeah.
that? They don't really know, but you can speculate. Maybe
Uh-huh.
you're just a little bit more mature at that point. Maybe, you're not too young and you're not too old. And then if you're over 36, maybe you're a little too set in your ways and you can't adapt to having,
Mhm.
a life partner, living with somebody new. And maybe that
Totally.
leads to it. I don't know. I mean, again, we're speculating, but it's just interesting
Ye-
thinking about it, how that
Yeah,
impacted us. The mall
yeah.
culture, the hot
Mhm.
topics, dropping yourself,
Yes.
getting dropped off at the mall with $20 or whatever and hanging out for a
Yes, the
few
food
hours.
courts.
Yes, yeah, in the
Yeah,
emo clothes, yeah, that you just got
yeah,
from Hot Topic.
yeah.
All of that stuff, Spencer's gifts, this,
Oh my God. That is wild. Claire's accessories, even,
yeah, yeah, get
like,
your ears pierced at Claire's, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And you come home with an earring or something from the mall, yeah, the movie theaters,
yeah.
and yeah, I did think. I mean, obviously, my children's too young. Yours are too young to do at that stage too. But like, I wonder. I hear things about I don't know the Gen Z and stuff, and Gen Alpha and these kind of I don't know. They're not doing that. They're just these kind of spaces where you can just go and
Mhm.
hang unsupervised for the most part. It's not even like you're getting in trouble. You're just kind of hanging around and like yeah,
Yeah,
like it's not like
yeah,
you're graffitiing buildings or something. You're just kind of hanging.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right
I don't
though.
know.
Yeah, yeah, I did see this. I'm not going to quote it correctly, but my sister and I were kind of discussing it briefly, where there is like this new research that's coming out about like, kids these days, there's like a huge percentage that haven't like ridden their bike alone around the
Right.
street or things like that, and you're right, like that unsupervised space is something that I think is quickly disappearing. And I don't know if it's because our hyper awareness of the world around us, if the world actually has become more unsafe, if it's we know too much, I don't know. I
Right.
don't know what it is.
It's just in our face all the time, whereas
It's in our face
before,
all the time, all of the things that could go wrong, blasting you. If it's the
right.
news, if it is the world we live in,
There's video of everything now. Yeah. There's not
Yeah.
just a reporter, you read about it in a journalism article or something. You see the
Yeah.
live video. I mean, this assassination here, or the murder, the guy,
Yeah.
the right-wing commentator, I guess we should mention
Mhm.
it. Charlie
Charlie
Kirk
Kirk.
got
Yeah.
literally assassinated in the middle of
I know.
something. I mean, I don't mean to laugh here. It's just so insane.
It is.
Uh,
It is insane. I feel
eh,
as if we're living in a movie. And I on Wednesday, on the day that he was shot, I had the craziest day. To be completely transparent, I didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was.
right. Yeah.
And I just was my phone was blowing up. I was actually working. I've been working a part-time marketing job, running the marketing for a startup. I was working, and then my son had flag football, and I was making dinner, and then my baby, and
Right.
I actually had a really big book club that evening where I was going to speak, and I was like the PTO of my son's school, so there was like 20 people that were going to be there. It was a big. So, anyways, I opened my phone, and it's the video of him
Yeah, the
being
video that was that's what I was going to say. Just that didn't exist, before social media, where you just couldn't see a
correct.
video of somebody getting murdered like live. Like,
Like I cannot
yeah,
unsee that. I
right,
couldn't even have actively avoided it because it was like right when I opened my app.
right. And it was everywhere at the time. And
Yes, has
yeah,
it been taken? That it was horrific. Like I hope that's been taken down because now that video lives on.
right.
And regardless of, I know it's been again politicized. um,
Everything is now. Yeah, everything
Everything is
is. Yeah.
now. Yes, but
Which
like
is
that
hard for artists, which just makes it hard for us, for artists. Yeah, but yeah.
does. It really does make it so hard for us because I feel like we're asked to commentate on everything, to make a comment on everything. And
And if you
uh,
don't say the right thing, there are severe consequences. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a
yeah.
tricky, tricky line. Thankfully, I'm not big enough where people where I have to worry
Yeah.
about clips of myself going viral, but who knows?
I said, I
Maybe
think
we'll be
most,
laughing in a few years about this
yeah.
one.
I said most authors are probably safe. Nobody cares enough unless it's, yeah, you're like JK or Stephen King or somebody at that level, like doing
Right.
where you're globally known by everybody.
Right.
But I wanted
Right.
to ask you, okay, so after you had the successful career, you were becoming a mother and all of that,
Mhm.
why write fiction? I always say, I joke on the podcast, it's like the worst business out there, fiction writing. What got you
Yeah.
into writing fiction? What drove you to say, you know what, I'm gonna start going into fiction despite, having a successful career doing other things and having my
Mhm.
family, a young family. What drove you to fiction writing? Why fiction?
Well, I started writing my first novel, The Rising Order, when I didn't have kids. So I think that's a very important statement because I do have a lot of moms who look at me and ask me like, "How did you do
Right,
this?" And I say I did it when I didn't have kids.
right,
Now I wrote the second one when I did, and that was it took a lot longer because of
right,
that. But what started my pursuit of fiction was when I finally started working at Google. It had been like my dream job.
right,
And I've always been the type of person who I will go after what I want and I won't stop until I get it. And I've always been tenacious that way. And so I learned about Google in college in my organizational workplace class. And it was a discussion about Google as a corporation and how it was changing the culture of the workplace, which at the time it was, and we still can attribute, I think, the revolution of tech even to Google.
search, Gmail, all of that was, yeah,
Yes,
they made it
yes.
free and easy for everybody. Like you could do Yahoo, you could do these other Hotmail, these other things before Google. It was just Google made it a little simpler, a little easier. It
Yeah.
was free, like and it was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that like even tech aside, they were the first to offer a maternity leave that was like 6 months long,
right,
5 months long. They were the first to offer um they were the first to showcase like, wow, if you treat your employees a certain way, they will ride or die you,
right. Free
as a
drinks and snacks in the
free
break room.
drinks and
Yes,
snacks and,
yes, that was a
whole
Silicon
campus and
Valley. Yeah,
workout classes exactly, and the retention that you'll have when you have happy employees and the caliber of a corporation. As a result, you'll have the top talent who
right,
continue to work for you. So anyway, long story short, I was like, oh, I want to work for them, I will work for them. And so long story short, after a few jobs in Chicago, I ended up getting my dream job at Google. Not my dream job at Google, but I ended up getting working for Google.
right,
And I slowly started to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't it.
right.
And I felt there was something really missing in my life. And what is that? And the more soul searching I did, the more I realized that if I really wanted to feel fulfilled, I needed to pursue this dream of mine to be an author. And then I started writing the story, and it was the first one that I finished from start to end, and went on the publication journey. And that was a whole other journey.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I want to get to that too. The public. I mean, this is the type of podcast with listeners, and I might me myself too. I'm curious how it
Yeah, of
went, all the
course.
different methods that are available, what
Yeah.
it takes. I think people they like to fantasize about the Colleen Hoovers, the Brandon Sandersons, and stuff. You know, that's the
Mm,
1%. That's the Stephen King level, but in the
yes.
self-publishing world, and
Yes. Yes.
that's
Yes.
it. You can do it. But I mean,
Mhm.
people forget about the years that they were hustling, the years that Sanderson was putting out YouTube videos and nobody was watching them. Okay.
A
You know, there was years of
thousand
that.
percent.
Yeah.
Yes.
It took a while. Hoover, the same
Yes.
stuff. You know, nobody,
Yeah, Colleen Hoover,
you
you heard
know,
about her. Like, do you know how many books Colleen Hoover had written before
right.
she became Colleen
Yeah.
Hoover? Like, absolutely. Even Fourth Wing, great example.
Yeah.
Um, that author wrote, I think she had like 20 books published or something like that before this one. And she was not a household name like she is
Right.
now. And so anyway, yeah.
And that's why I bring up the cultural shift too, because when we were
Yeah.
growing up, there was still kind of a literary culture, and there is a literary culture now, but it's so fractured and splintered into these, oh, if you like young adult, you don't read, you know, you're not involved in the literary, or oh, if you're involved in the literary, you know, you don't care about the sci-fi, or it's just this constant little like severing off little niches in the lit, and it's kind of fractured everything so that nobody's like talking to one another or like, you know,
Mhm.
appreciating the whole of it. And I always emphasize on that this on that podcast, but I think something like social media is the reason for that, because you can kind of, you know, narrow yourself down into your very specific, oh well, I really like this specific type of book, and that's all you
Mhm.
see and that's all you can participate in, you know, all of that. And then there's different silos, and obviously there's the echo chamber effect, and then blah 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 blah, on and on and on. But it's all like from this stupid algorithm that I call it addiction software, because that's what it is. It's meant to just
Yes.
addict you to the screen, so you just scroll scroll scroll, whatever comes across that, you know,
Yeah.
takes all your time and makes you think about certain things, and you wouldn't otherwise. I don't know, that just that plays into it more than I think people are willing to admit,
Oh,
in terms of,
absolutely.
they're like, oh, what's happening to fiction? What's happening to publishing? What's happening to, you know, all this stuff? And I'm like, well, it may be more related to how people consume content now than anything else that happened. You know, just the way everything is so fast. People don't even have the attention span to read a book anymore. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a constant theme on the podcast. I'm always curious, yeah, about how social plays into it and all of that.
totally. Yeah, it's a huge part of it. And I think one thing that authors underestimate, regardless of your publication path, whether you're traditionally published, whether you're self-published, um, in my case, which I'll talk to you about with the first one, I would the hybrid route, which is what well, I'll explain a little bit about what that is, but you have to think of if you want to be a full-time author, which I don't recommend, to be
Yeah.
quite frank. Until you have a few books out and you start establishing yourself as a name brand. But you know what? Maybe if you have a great supportive partner, whatever that looks like, or something, and that's something you can do, fantastic, do it. I mean, I'm not to say like joy should always be the first priority in your life. Um, but you need to think of this as you are the CEO of a business. Like you
Right.
need to think of if you would like to make money, if that's the goal of
Right.
publication
Or
and
have
publishing
people
your
read you.
novel,
Yeah.
then you need to think of this as a business. Like you are your CEO, your CFO, and your CMO. And um, I I know that the expectation is that you will be on social media, or you will be talking about yourself, about your book, about the process. Um, that might look different for everybody, but that I think is a necessity if you want to be successful now. And
Right.
that's a lot. That in itself could be a full-time job. I mean, when I first came out with the Rising Order, I was trying to create content for Instagram,
Right.
TikTok, Facebook, Threads now, Twitter,
Hmm.
like YouTube, like you said, if you have a YouTube channel. And you think you can repurpose content, you actually really can't if you want to be successful with it because you're speaking to different people on each platform and each respond to different messages. So I'm not sitting here telling listeners to that this is something that's required. I still think like I, for example, am most comfortable on Instagram. I have the most followers there. I have the most engagement. So I'm not saying you have to be on all of them, but I'm just saying that like when you approach your marketing strategy, like you need to have ownership in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always we had a writer on a few weeks ago. He said something that I thought was struck me where he said, you know, you can write books or you can market books. It's pretty hard to
Yeah.
do both. It's pretty hard
Yes.
to do both because then if
A
you're
thousand
marketing,
times yes.
it's
Yes.
taking away all your time that you would usually spend writing, and then you have to go see it if you're spending time writing, well then it's taking away all the time that you would spend marketing. So it's
Exactly.
a tough, it's brutal. So that's why we're
It's
always
brutal.
curious about the different ways and we're
Yeah.
going to get to that, I promise. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask why young adult fiction? Why was that the one that you settled on? Was that just the right medium for the story? Was it just something in you? Do you prefer that genre? Yeah, why young adult fiction?
Well, so actually the Rising Order is not young adult. So it's
Oh,
adult fiction. Yes. So it is the main characters are about 27 years old, like 27 to 30 range. And I chose those ages for my main characters because it was the life stage that I was in when I was writing the story.
right.
And with it being my first book, I was very much writing what I knew. And I think that that age is not represented as often in fiction. It's usually like, oh, adult or young adult. And there's this kind of weird in between that's not necessarily new adult, but like, what is it? Where you think you're kind of supposed to have life figured out. You know, you're done with college, you're starting your career, and you're realizing, oh crap, like you never really have life figured out. And thus life kind of smacks you in the face. My sister-in-law said that. It's like I think when you're like right around 25. And I think that's true. Like I think that you're faced with new anxieties and new realizations that are very formative. And so thus one of my main characters was born. And I think that was me processing those anxieties of the world that we live in, you know.
Yeah, I remember in grad school when I was there, there was people kept saying this thing. They kept saying quarter life crisis, not midlife crisis, but quarter life, right?
Yes,
So at
yes,
25 or something. Is that
yes.
just a millennial thing? Was that just our
Maybe it is.
generation? Were we just so, you know, our boomer parents just spoiled us and smothered us with so much love that like when we reached 25, we're like, wait a minute, this isn't what was promised to us. I
Or
don't
I
know.
actually think it's a little different. I think it's for me personally, seeing that my dad worked one job. Like he worked very few
Yeah,
jobs. You know what I
right,
mean? He had like
right.
big chunks and he had a few
A
jobs.
career. You could still have a career. Yeah, back then. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I think that that's very different with our generation. I
Yeah.
think that we are kind of but my dad was never like happy. He never seemed very happy in those jobs, even though he was had the definition of success.
Right.
And I think that our generation isn't as inclined to settle for that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting. The priorities per gender. I know obviously this is I mean, and social media exacerbates this. I don't remember ever having this much discussion, you know, on a daily basis that, you know, when you log into Twitter or Instagram, there's just discussions about the generational divides. I don't remember that ever happening until like social media became a thing.
I
It's
know.
just
There's
this
just so much
constant,
talk.
yeah.
It's like talk, 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 talk. It's so
the
loud.
discourse the discourse it's ongoing, it never ends. You can use, I think, I mean obviously you the easiest thing, the my initial instinct when you see that is always to ignore it, to just be like, oh well, screw that. But I always think like, as a writer or somebody like you said trying to use social media to market your stuff, whatever,
Mhm.
try to, as a writer, at least this is what I give advice to, try to use it to your advantage. Try to, you know, it's always going on, so you can jump
Mhm.
in and, you know, use that to market your book and then jump back out. You know, you don't have to comment on every little thing. You can pick and choose. Try to
Mhm.
use it to your advantage when something's broke, you know, a big discourse thing's going off. Be like, oh, well, this is in my book. You know, put a couple posts out there for a few days, and, you know, don't
Totally.
have to comment on the thing specifically, but, you know, whatever. Like, So I mean, I don't know people. A lot of people are afraid of this. A lot of people are scared. They don't want the backlash, the mean comments. And I mean, come on, I have a podcast. I'm on YouTube. Mean comments come in all the time. Like it's a
Yes.
part of it. You want to be somebody whose creative work is consumed by the public. Well, the public, when they consume things, are going to say things like this. They're going to comment on things. They're going to tell you you
Yes.
suck. They're going to say that you're
Yes.
call you names. They're going to use this political framework, whatever it is. You just have to
Yes.
be like, you know what, there it's not true. And then you just have to keep going, kind of, yeah, like it's just I don't know.
Yes. You have to, I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but like you really do have to develop that thick skin,
Yeah.
and move on. Like truly. And everybody, if you are going to write books and words for consumption, everyone is going to have their opinion on that
Right.
and they are entitled to it. That's why you're doing it. And
Right.
they're not going to think of it the same way as you. And that's been a really important lesson for me to learn. And I doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but like you should also value if you're going to see the reviews and like look at them
Right.
and see what people are saying about you, then try to take something from it and find value in it. Like, or then just don't look at it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
All engagement is good engagement. Yeah, kind of
all
take the book out
engagement
of
is
that. Yeah.
yes, yes. And like I said, there's some days it's going to be a lot easier than others. And no, a lot of readers are not going to know what you put into that book. And that's not what they're supposed to. They're doing it for enjoyment. And so yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. And I think one thing I found on social media that was really effective with the first book coming out is I documented my journey for a long time. So like if this is something that you kind of want to do, even though it might be very hard and it might feel very vulnerable, I shared early on, like, I want to be a writer. And I
Yeah.
documented when I went to writers' conferences and the people I met along the way and the journey and the rejections and the rejections and the rejections. And I can't tell you how many people were like, holy crap, I had no idea that the publishing industry was basically so brutal or that it
Yeah.
took so long or that like X, Y, and Z. And so when the book finally came out, people found like people were thrilled for me and with me
Right.
because they've been with me along the whole way.
Yeah.
um, and I can't talk about this is up to everybody author's complete discretion. I know there's various comfort levels with this, but like I do allow my profile to be public because I feel like I kind of have to with
Right.
the book. And then I do share my life in terms of my family. And because I can't talk about writing all the time, but I
Right.
think people do also find enjoyment in that aspect too, about like I'm not just a writer, and that's important. Like I'm also a mother and a wife and a friend and a sister,
Right.
and I have a lot of things going on in my life that are dictating my writing, my time to write, my time to talk about the books. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's, I mean, like, yeah, like you are building a brand, and I know, most of these writers are introverts, they don't want to do that, but like, yeah, you do have to be public. If you want,
Mhm.
if you build it, they will come type thing. You have to kind of build it. And like what you were doing, you were essentially building an audience before the book was even out, and then by the time the
Yeah.
book. If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, jerk shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard. Comes out, even if it's small,
Exactly.
even if it's just a few people or 100 people, whatever it is, now you have those people that are interested. Maybe they'll buy the book, maybe they won't, maybe they will. But I mean, it's just you're building that. It's a long game. It's a long game here. You don't have to have, a bestseller breakout your very first book or your first couple books. It's just,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But speaking of books, I wanted to ask you about dystopian settings and the kind of,
Yes.
what is it about dystopian settings that enhances a work of fiction, or, why do you find it as enticing as a creative, like a good place to work in and all of that? I know that's a big
Um,
question. Yeah, answer it however you want. Yeah, answer it however you
no.
feel. Like,
Okay. My thoughts. I think as a Harry Potter lover, for example, not to go back to Harry Potter again, but
you
think
can,
about
yeah,
the world, the fantasy world that is created when you read fantasy, whether it
yeah,
be Harry Potter or Fourth Wing. You are starting something from the ground up that is completely new. And I think that I underestimated how hard that would be is to write fantasy. And I always, for example, when I always talked about how I'd want to be a writer, I was like, oh, I'll probably do like science fiction or fantasy or whatnot. And this was when I was much younger, when I was like in high school, and it had always been a dream. And I can write neither. Absolutely write neither. And maybe eventually, maybe one day, who knows? Who knows? Never say never. But like to create a world from scratch is very hard. And I admire the people who do it. And some people do it, and that's what they love about it is like creating a whole new world and having complete, it's like a clay. You can build and do whatever you like. And what's there not to be that's so appealing? How could you not love that? But I like operating within the bounds of reality to some extent. And I think you can do that a lot in dystopian, but you also still kind of create your own world. Like in the second book, the first book, The Rising Order, is much about the lead up to kind of a dystopian society, but in a present day world. So I was very influenced by common themes in our life. And then the New Order is like a dystopian Chicago, but kind of like present day dystopian and what that would look like. And that was a lot harder to write because there was a lot of world building that I had to do there. So that's kind of my thought about why I think dystopian is like this middle ground between fantasy and science fiction almost, but then it's not quite as challenging. But it also still has this new world romanticization that we talked about, where people are enthralled with that.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking specifically in terms of like, I wonder if like the dystopian thing is, yeah, because you can take the world that everybody knows, the order, everything that everybody knows, the manners, the customs, the traditions, et cetera, the laws,
Yes.
and then that gives you a starting place where you can almost juxtapose those over the dystopian world that you're creating, and it
Yeah.
uses the reader's prior expectations and knowledge and kind of uses that as a
Correct.
kind of
Hmm.
deterrent in the craft to make it more interesting. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
always interesting with world building. That's a big one, especially when you go into the sci-fi stuff. And
Yes.
there's ways to do it that I think can bog down when you're, for a reader at least. It might be a lot of fun to
Hmm.
write it out as a writer, but then it's like I think of always the example I use that everybody knows is the Game of Thrones books. You look at
Hmm.
like George R. R. Martin. If
Hmm.
anybody that's read those things, they're good. They're very, they're page turners, but there's also it does get bogged down in some of the description. Like he gets so into
Oh
describing some of
yeah.
this stuff
Same
that
with
it's
like
kind of like,
J.R.R. Tolkien
oh
and The
God,
Hobbit and Lord of the
yes.
Rings. Like
The
pages of
songs and
description.
yeah,
Yes.
and you just
And
have to kind of. I just remember the George R. R.
yes.
Martin again, the first Game of Thrones book. There's like every time there's a feast, there's like 4 or 5 pages that just describe the feast on the table. And at a
Oh my
certain point, I was like, I'm ready to start skipping chunks to whenever
God.
this is stop describing. So that's a way you can overdo it. You can overdo it and bore your reader,
Absolutely.
but you do just enough. And I love Kurt Vonnegut and stuff. I'm thinking my favorite book by Vonnegut is Breakfast of Champions, where he writes that whole book as if he's writing it describing Earth to like an alien species or something, like describing our habits, our
Yeah.
customs, and like it's almost like an anthropological, and it's very funny because of that. So that's a way to like put
Uh-huh.
humor into it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what do we do? Oh, we wake up in the morning and we drink this like bitter, brown coffee, liquid or whatever, and we get into these
Yeah.
death trap boxes, these cars that are made of like quarter tons of steel, and we drive them,
Nice.
60 miles an hour. Just like a weird thing. So even
Yeah.
like just describing things like that, I think you
Like
can.
a commentary, like you said. Yeah.
Exactly. And that becomes a
Yeah.
commentary just through the setting itself or through the laws in the new dystopian thing or the breaking from norms and traditions that you're already expecting, in your head as a reader. So yeah, I was just
Mhm.
thinking craft wise, if that was easier, harder, maybe a little both, depending on what you're trying to do, gives you something to work with. I don't know. I just think of like, as a writer, as a
Yeah.
creative, the structures that exist and then
Yeah.
using them to your advantage.
Yes.
So I was just curious how you went about it, or yeah, if it was just
That
more fun, like it's just something that you drawn in because it's more fun to do that, which is perfectly valid reason, to do that as a
Yeah,
creative. Yeah.
I think that it is more fun, but like you said, you still kind of have some structure of like what the reader expects. So it's not like you have to do, it's not quite as hard, in my opinion, for me personally. So it kind of gives you flexibility to push those boundaries in a way that could quote unquote be like believable.
Right.
Or it doesn't really matter if it's believable, I think I should say instead. It doesn't matter if it's believable or not. But you still like have, like I said, that foundation of like what the reader knows about our world that we live in and exist in today. um but then you don't have to draw from an imagination well that, like, for example, I saw the Dune movies with my husband, and like I cannot imagine writing that
Right.
story, like that to me is so mind-blowing as an artist that somebody can do, like, what, how does one do that? And I have no words. So and I feel like science fiction in that realm is even more different from like the Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones you can even almost draw from like history. And
And it basically is. Yeah.
yeah, but when you're talking about like planets and whatnot and these
Right.
machines and like I don't know, like, and then to translate that even into film, I can't even imagine what that would process would be like, where you're having to essentially bring this to life. So
Yeah.
anyway, yes, that's I think why I fall kind of in that area. But it also could be that, like, the book that I'm working on right now, it's very different from that. Like, it's not dystopian. It won't be the kind of hardcore thriller that both the Rising Order and the New Order are, that are very action packed. I'm still just trying to work on, do I want to lean a little bit into the psychological thriller space more with it or not? But maybe it's just me also as an artist being influenced by life and where I am in life.
Branching out. Yeah. You want to
Mhm.
try something new now that you've done that already. I think that's
Exactly.
underrated, especially in like, I came out of academia, so scholarship around, Hemingway and these other, big, big writers and stuff, poets and things.
Yeah.
I think as people are just, maybe it's if you're not doing creative work yourself, but I think it's easy to get bored. It's easy to get tired of
Yes.
doing the same thing. You don't want to do the same thing. And you even see
Yes.
some of these big writers like Stephen King. He's said stuff publicly about that where he felt trapped almost because people
Mm.
wanted another horror Stephen King horror novel, his
Yeah.
style. And he was like at a certain point in the 80s, like late 80s, early 90s, he's like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like I'm kind of sick
Yeah.
of doing that. I want to do, a Shawshank Redemption, or so I want to do like a straight
Yeah.
novel that isn't supernatural. I don't want to do a horror. I want to do, I don't know, something like that. I don't know.
Totally.
Because you just get bored. You need to keep it fresh. You need to experiment, and maybe it'll fail. Maybe it won't work. Maybe it won't be as good as something like, what your bread and butter is. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel you have to as a creative, or you're going to stagnate, and that doesn't feel
Yes.
good anyway. Yeah. So,
I totally agree, and I think that it keeps your story well full. Um, and like I actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because I had intended for this to be a trilogy instead of a duology. And um, after I spent so much time trying to get the first one published the traditional way, I by the time this book came out, The Rising Order, it I'd been working on it for almost 7 years. And of course I'd rewritten, this was the first book that I started and finished. There was a huge amount of learning that I did throughout that process, like a huge steep learning curve. So by the time I wrote the second book and started the second book, it wasn't I was much more comfortable as a writer, working with my writers group, with editing, the characters. But I was, by the time the second book came out, it would have been almost a decade that I've been working on this story and
right.
trying to get the story published. And like a lot of life happened in between then, right? Because at that point, like I had two kids, I was pregnant with my third, like there was a lot of life going on. But as you were saying, I got really, I was like, I can't do a third. I have to do something different. I am ready for something different. And so I shortened it to a duology. I left the ending of the second. a little open-ended. Like I think there's enough closure that will satisfy readers, but I left it a little open-ended so I can always go back to it if I want. But I'm ready to do something different.
Yeah. Even you mentioned the Doom movies. I remember the director of those movies, the newer ones that just came out. He even said something where they said, "Oh, are you going to do the third part three?" You know, and he was
Yeah.
like, "I might want to take a little break." And he's like, "Yeah," because as a creative, he's like, "Do I really want to spend another 2, 3 years working on the same project that I've been doing the last 6 years? Like I want a
Yeah.
little bit of something else." Sounds like they offered him enough money that he's just like, "Okay, I'll do the third part," but still.
Oh, what a problem.
That I mean, that's something you. I mean, yeah, of course, yeah. When you get to that stage, of course, yeah, what a problem. But that's something too.
Yeah.
Is like, okay,
Yeah.
I think of maybe it's easier to just take the money than it is to follow the creative intuition. And I don't know, that's a tough
Yeah.
decision at that level. That's a tough decision to make.
Absolutely.
Before we get
No,
on,
you're
no,
so right.
please,
That is a
please.
tough decision at level and not one that I've had to face yet, but like I've never thought about it that way. Like
Right. Yeah.
where if you do kind of like that's how the fourth wing author feels. And she said in interviews that she between each of the fourth wing books, she just came out with a third one not long ago. And she has to write a different book in between because she
Right.
can't just kind of like and now I understand that for that exact reason. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It just not that you get bored, but you just kind of are like you don't feel as fulfilled because you want to stretch that muscle a little bit more and do
Yeah.
something
And you need
else.
a
Yeah.
break from the world
Right.
often. Yeah. Yeah.
And before we get into all of the nitty gritty about publishing and the routine and all of that, I wanted to ask you about the power of story more generally. And this is something I think that's just it's in the culture. It's been fluttering around. And it's always difficult to talk about cultural things that are just, I always call it's like a cloud hovering over us. So it's like hard to
Yes.
grab on and touch and pull out examples. But I don't know, just constantly the power of story. I wanted to ask you, do stories hold power? Are we exaggerating that power? Are we being more fearful of it than we should be? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, kind of the power of story, its place, because you have a lot of kind of prescient themes, things that you used in your work. I don't know. What do you think about that in terms of either fiction or nonfiction stories? I always think about mythology. I like even American mythology, George Washington and the cherry tree.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I like that. It's like, what does that do? Well, it kind of binds us in terms of like everybody who's an American is like, oh, we value honesty. That's like a mythology story that we're like, oh, you cannot tell a lie, right? Like, and of course, it's a
Yes.
fiction. It never happened. It's a myth that was like been immortalized and then grown into this cultural thing. But like, I don't know. I was just thinking the power of story. Where do you fall in that? What do you think about that? How do you use it? And again, we don't need definitive answers. Just I know I'm throwing a
No.
lot at you. So however you want to approach
Um,
that.
no, I think that the power of story is understated. I don't think there's anything more powerful. And I don't mean that in a way I'm not exaggerating. I mean that when I was at Google, we took entire trainings when we were in sales about the power of story because
Right.
it's what people remember. And I think you're right. It ties in emotion and it ties in an arc and themes about what matters to our culture at the time, to your point about like honesty. And so I think that story is underutilized as one of the most important things that could hopefully turn things around and this make this little dark cloud that's hovering over us a little bit brighter. Because it allows people to connect in a different way with different experiences and take them to different places and think about things from different perspectives. And that's been one of the most what word am I trying to say about my to hear from readers about how it's made them think about things differently has been one of the most rewarding parts of the publication journey and of writing this book. And that's because the characters that I write aren't simple and they're not black and white and they're very complicated. And, the other perspective that I write, one of my characters is extremely morally, not even gray. I'd say he's like morally
Yeah.
black.
Yeah.
And I think that it's allowed me to explore the future that I want for my children. And the only way that we can do that is by telling stories and allowing them to think about things differently.
Right.
if
Yeah.
I articulated that in a way that
No,
made
I
sense.
mean, I think absolutely. I had he's retired now, but I've had him on a few times as a former marketing executive, ran
Hmm.
his own marketing firm in New York for many years, and now has gotten into fiction writing. So he's come on a few times, and we love him. Yeah,
Yeah.
go listen to those episodes, listeners. Um, and we talked about this briefly when I had him on the first time. I was like, what do you see in advertising? And one thing he said, he's retired now, as a guy, a grizzled veteran of that industry, and of course he's a little older, doesn't quite understand the social aspect of it, but he was
Yeah.
just saying the stuff he sees when he's watching TV or something, and like he said, there's a lack of story. Where he said they're not telling you, or they're doing half the story in a lot of advertising right now, where
Yes.
they're not giving you like something that's making you want to buy this product, or you need this product, or like making you feel like you get something out of it.
Hmm.
We're not tapping into that psychological part that makes you want to purchase a product, or like, oh, I have to have this product or something, or service, or whatever it is you're advertising. I don't know. I was just thinking
I
about
couldn't
that
agree with that
too.
more.
And you
Like
think
I
of,
really
yeah,
couldn't.
we could talk
Yeah.
about politics, the narrative we tell people for politics, but of course that can get squeaky depending on audience here. But it's
Yeah.
still like, for all these different things, it matters so much. The myths, the romanticizing, the stories that we tell ourselves. Even I think it's stories about love, true love, finding things, these kind of, you know, if we're more cynical about something like marriage, or, finding true love or something like that, then less people are going to look for it and want to find it. But if
Yeah.
we more romanticize it a little bit more and give them a good story, like these kind of romantic stories that have, throughout history, Jane Austen, these kind of things, even I would say some of the, the Disney Renaissance when we were growing up, these
Hmm.
love stories, the princess and prince and kind of
Hmm.
things, in these different ways. I don't know. If we don't romanticize that, then we'll never go for it or something. Or we don't have a story that's telling us that this is something to do or something
Hmm.
worth pursuing. We maybe forget about it or something. It's like a reminder. So everything from
Yeah.
advertising to enjoying fiction to even like more
Yes.
serious things, faith or something, even like religion. I mean, all these things matter so much, and the story we tell ourselves, and what happens. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but I was curious your thoughts on that, about what happens
Yeah.
with story and how it's playing out in our culture right now. And you think
Yeah.
that even on social media, and the big problem with social media is people will create a fake story,
I
and
know.
it'll fly. It'll fly around the world pretty quickly here, but
Yeah.
that sets the tone for everything that comes after. I've noticed this, even like you'll see something, the New York Times article, the Wall Street Journal article won't be about the thing that happened. It'll be about the reaction to the thing that happened. That's like the reaction
Yeah.
online, what
Yeah.
people are saying online about what happened. And I'm just kind of like, it depends how we frame this story. Is it about what, random people are saying online reacting to it? Or is it about, the event that took place?
Mhm.
And how are you framing that? And I don't know, it's just a lot of weird stuff like that, that it's all tied up, I think, in storytelling and literature right now. But
No,
yeah,
that's so true. That's such a good point. I've never thought about it that way, about how how the focus is almost changed a little bit.
yeah,
And I also think that there's so much noise. Um, like to your point, our attention spans have shrunk. And that's because we're constantly like bouncing back and forth between like email and, Netflix and I don't know, Amazon Prime shows, and
right,
there's so much content to consume. It's like a content war on top of that. So like you're battling for people's attention and you know that it's shrunk. And so how do you do that? So to your point, you eliminate the story arc of it, but really that's almost like what people are craving,
right.
and that connection. Um,
And where maybe it allows people to put whatever story they want onto it, so then you get crazy things, or you get maybe
yeah.
overly political things, maybe too partisan. I don't know. I mean, you can get all these different things that people will just use to justify whatever story they want to put on it. Yeah, if you don't give
Yeah.
them the story.
Yes.
So
But
you
that's
think,
why
yeah,
I actually wrote the Rising Order and the New Order exactly how I like to consume stories.
right.
And for me personally, I'm very character driven, but I'm also plot driven.
Oh
And
yeah,
so I like love the depth. I have to have deep characters that you feel connected with, and that you're cheering for, no matter what, no matter, even if they are the anti-hero, the villain, the bad
right.
guy.
Yeah,
Understanding their story
yeah,
and examining their story is something I've always loved, whether it be in movies or books or whatnot, shows. Um, and then, you know, I don't know, just so then I had to have elements of romance in it because to your point, as
Right.
millennials, we romanticize everything. But then I had to have a lot of action in it because I feel like that's what keeps the pages turning. It makes you want to keep reading. Um, I love contemporary fiction. I love romance stories, but then I lose interest. I get bored really easily because I need to have something that kind of like continues to pull me along. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's figuring out how I want to do that for my newest book is going to be a different challenge because I'm not going to have the thriller action to kind of propel the reader through those pages. But I have some ideas about ways that I want to do it that will hopefully keep them locked in.
Yeah, I had a guest on over a year ago now. We ended up talking about we were talking about books, but we always end up talking about something else too. We ended up talking about The Boys, that kind of comic book show on Amazon.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I
It's
haven't watched it.
I only watched the first season. I'm not a huge comic book style person. So,
Huh.
when I watched it
Yeah.
because it was being talked about and I kind of fallen off, I haven't really kept up. But it was something that happened. There was conversation going on about Homeland, the villain in that series.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, this villain, but the actor's very charismatic and he's kind of charming playing this villain. And like
Yeah.
the guy was just making this point. Shout out to Yerk. He was on here just making this point. He was just saying, you're supposed to be conflicted about that. You're supposed to kind of like this guy and also be like,
Yes.
he's the villain. You're supposed,
Yes.
it's designed for you to feel this way, to
Yes.
like
Yes.
be enticed by this guy, but then also
Exactly.
like you're supposed to feel that, the anti-hero Breaking Bad, like you're supposed to kind of
Yes.
like it and then
The
also be
Walking
like,
Dead, Jeffrey
yes,
Dean Morgan, as
exactly,
Negan. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be a little uncomfortable, like that's literally by design, and you're
I'm
missing
gonna
the
use
design.
that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
like
use that
yeah,
because one of my main characters that's like the number one question I get at book clubs or things
right.
that I'm doing podcasts. And yeah, I'm gonna say that. Who said that?
He goes by Yurik online. I know that's a
Uric. I'll say
crazy.
Uric.
Yeah.
Shout out to you. You don't know me.
Yeah, yeah. It was just an interesting thing that I think about, yeah, now with this kind of how people because the story, how are you interpreting the story? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's move on to publishing here. I know we're bumping up.
I
I want to get
know.
everything in. All right, why did you choose to publish the way you did? So you said you did a hybrid for the first, then you did self-publishing for the second. Why did
Yeah.
you choose to go about that way?
The reason I chose to go about it that way is because I went the traditional route at first. So I spent a long time trying to get an agent. And then once I got an agent for the Rising Order, we went on submission. And by the time I got an agent and we went on submission, which is when, for the listeners who don't know or might not be familiar with it, it's when your agent essentially tries to sell your manuscript to one of the publishing houses. There's a lengthy process that
Usually takes years. Yeah.
takes years. And it's so funny because like right when you think you have an agent, you spend so long trying to get an agent because that's so hard, and then you're like, oh yes, I got it, I'm gonna get published, and it's like, nope, wrong. There's another
Yep.
another layer. So we went on submission and we had a lot of interest in the book and the manuscript. But it was right around the time that COVID happened. And there was a lot of uncertainty and there was a lot of stress, like
Yeah.
there was a lot of unknowns, like I said, uncertainty. Um, the publishing industry was even facing like, paper shortages. Like it
Right.
was just a tumultuous time. And so I'm not going to blame the fact of timing, but I think timing is a really key component of it, no matter what, and whatever you're trying to do. Whenever you're trying to get an agent, if your agent's on submission, like timing is always going to be a really critical factor. And I hate to say that, and that's why I do think there is always a little bit of luck that's involved
Oh yeah.
in the instances where there's lightning in a bottle if you're very successful or whatnot. And so anyway, long story short, we were never able to sell it. We were never able to get a deal or get it acquired. But I refused to kind of I wasn't like I said, I'm a very tenacious person. And I was like, no, are you kidding? I've worked forever on these stories. I need to get these out in the world. Like I've been working on this. This has been my life's work at a quarter of a decade, I mean, life's work. Let's not call it that. Rephrase that. I've been working on it for a very long time. I refused to let that be the answer. I wasn't going to let my book die in submission, as
Right.
we say in the author community. And so I knew at the time I was still working at Google. I had two young kids, and I knew I was not going to be able to self publish it. Like, I wasn't going to have the capacity to do that.
Right.
I didn't want to do it on my own. And at the time, hybrid publishing was becoming a really an option for authors who kind of wanted the autonomy, who wanted to continue to own the rights, but then who didn't have the distribution power that you
Right.
do, that you missing when you do self publish, as well as a team of, of editors and design staff and whatnot, and marketers who this is what they know. And so the hybrid publisher who I went with, and I think it's very important for listeners that if you do want to go this route, you really need to make sure it's a legitimate hybrid publisher who has a team who will give you services in exchange for money. And so that's what hybrid is you pay some of the costs up front, but you retain higher royalties on the other side of it. So that's what I ended up doing for the first one. And then by the time the second one came out, I was so knowledgeable about the industry and made so many connections that I knew I could probably make more money if I self-published. And so that's why I went that route. But another reason why I also wanted to consolidate and make it just a duology was because I would like to attempt to go based on my book sales and based on the people I know in the industry now. After the work that I put in, I'd like to try to get an agent again and try to get traditionally published with this
Right.
one, since it's going to be a standalone novel. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's so many options here too with this,
Yeah.
but I think the distribution is really the big one. That's a tough one. Even if
Yes.
you're going on a small press, well, like the reason
Yeah.
you don't get distributed is because that's a lot of work. You have to
Yeah.
have a team of
A lot of money,
lawyers, yeah, money,
margins, like, yeah.
lawyers to go and just make sure that you're getting distributed to these contracts, having contracts fulfilled, shipments going
Yeah.
to these stores. Like
Yeah.
it's a logistical nightmare that you would prefer not to do yourself. Although we've had people on that have done it themselves, hustled trunk of their car, going to local bookstores, being like, "Would you like to purchase these to put on your shelves?" And we've had some success stories about, not they're not millionaires, but they're doing it. They're writing
Yeah.
books and publishing it and getting it in local stores and libraries and things,
Yeah.
and just out of the
Yeah.
trunk of their car, driving around their local
And you
area.
can,
So,
like, I spent a lot of time with the first book establishing relationships with bookstore
yeah,
owners, whether it be like Barnes and Nobles. And even though I had a hybrid publisher who had a distribution team who was responsible for going out and trying to like sell it to the bookstores, which was the main reason why I chose that publisher. Um, you still have to do a lot of the legwork.
right,
And I was doing signings at every local bookstore around us. And a lot of them I've actually become close with. And I know I can like text or call at any time and be like, hey, like this event's coming up. And they're like,
right,
yes, we have you. That being said, they expect you to like bring in people. They
right.
expect you to interact with customers. Like you have to fulfill your end of the bargain on that. But distribution is a really big piece of that. And yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. And I think I've learned that I don't think you can speak to one person now where it's very, very rare to have like a linear success story.
Right.
Like it just doesn't happen. And if you do, I think it's less than 1%.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's just like all of these that like everybody's path of how they got to where they got is so different. And yeah, it's just very different.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend that came on the show and she had a deal with HarperCollins. So she had a big five deal and it came out right during COVID like that. But it was not just COVID, that screwed up a lot of her tour and like launch events. But even
Yeah.
that she said that while she was getting distribution from, a big five press that's, what everybody wants. She said she
Mhm.
was setting up these events herself still. Like didn't
Oh
have a
yeah.
team that were setting it up for her or anything. Like she had to still hustle in her local area, set up local events, check to see if every bookstore was carrying it or not. Like all of these things, like
Yeah.
even with that coveted, big five deal that everybody wants as an author, you're
Mhm.
still doing a lot of yourself. They still expect you to do the social media marketing. They still expect you to, yeah, do
Yes.
events and bring people in to buy the book or see
Yeah.
you read it or speak or something. Like there's expectations around it. So I was just curious about that because we like
Yeah.
these kind of details on this podcast.
Well, and one important aspect of that too, that's very important for traditional authors, if she doesn't fulfill her royalty agreement, like if
Mhm.
you don't earn out your royalty, which for listeners, like if a publishing house buys your book from you for like say $10,000, you don't start earning royalties on top of that until you basically like sell enough books that cover that advance.
Yeah.
So if there's a lot of authors who cannot earn out that advance payment. And
It's
if you
about
can't, then
90%. Yeah. That don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's because you don't quite understand how hard it is to sell books until you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
And no one's heard of you before.
I remember when I was in high school, I was in bands and stuff. This was the emo era.
The
And
email era.
we had to sell tickets, to the local shows. You had to pre-sale
Uh-huh.
tickets. It was harder to get your friends to show up to that fucking shit. All right. Let alone let them buy a book. Like they're not gonna buy your book. Like
A
it's just
thousand
yeah,
percent. Exactly.
it's never been easy to get people to oh, come see my creative project. Like maybe people
No.
are like, oh, I don't care.
And it takes a long time. Like I'm starting to get like so, and I don't want to say like, oh, I'm getting name recognition. I'm not talking myself that way, but like I'm starting to get some sort of name recognition now. I would say like 2 years solidly after the books passed. And it took
Right.
so much work. Like it
Yeah.
took so many saying yes to everything. And I'm still not even there, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, but like where people are finding out about me not through other people, you know
Right.
what I mean? That I know. So it just takes a lot. It is a grind. It is a grind.
But 10 years. I was going to ask about that because I wanted to ask
Yeah.
about ad campaigns and you have a history in marketing, so you understand making a
Yeah.
marketing plan and stuff for your things.
Uh-huh.
Did you have to do that for both books, obviously, right? Or
I had so through my publisher also I was able the marketing team was incredible and there were services that I was able to like and that was another reason why I didn't want to do it on my own just fully self-publishing was because there was so much I didn't know. Um and so I learned a lot through them about different strategies like the Goodreads strategies, Amazon strategies, like there was like a whole gamut. But I pretty much did like all of my own social media marketing. So I did have to develop a strategy
right.
there. Um and there was a lot of outreach that I also did, like I said before, for like bookstores, and I did my own podcast outreach, and there was just a lot of kind of scrappiness,
Yeah.
and I wasn't really able to develop a strategy at first because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And now for my second book, I was able to be a lot more targeted with that.
Yeah, we had a self-published writer on, Michael Fedor here, and he writes political thrillers. And
Uh-huh.
we asked him about this, the kind of similar thing where he used KDP, or he made his own press and used KDP through that.
Mhm.
And he was saying, yeah, he basically created a 10-year plan where he just said, look, I understand, you're not going to be turning a profit here. You're fishing for readers for the first 4 or 5 books here. Okay, this is going to be a
Yes.
10-year process, and I'm going to just looking
Smart.
for readers here,
So
and I'm just going
smart.
to maybe by the time I get to 10 years, if it's still not working, maybe we'll change something. But it's just it's
Mhm.
not going to be an overnight thing. And really, anything in the creative arts, it's very rarely an overnight thing.
No.
Tarantino has a famous quote where he said, everyone's, oh, Reservoir Dogs came out and it was big on the film circuit in the 90s. And he's like, oh, everyone's like, oh, this hotshot young director. He's like, okay, 8 years, guys. He's like, 8 years until that movie got made. Okay. He's like, 8 years. I
Yeah.
was trying to be a filmmaker until I
Yeah.
finally did it. And now they're like, oh, this guy came out of nowhere here. And it's like, no, he didn't. He's like, no, I
Yeah.
didn't. He's like, it was
I'm
eight
telling you, there's
years. Yeah.
always the story. There was always look into any success story, and there's at least usually like a decade of work behind it that makes them an overnight quote unquote success. Correct. It's so true. It's so true. And I think it's really important to talk about that because so often we want immediate gratification. And it was a really humbling experience to come out of the gate and be like, okay, like, I don't know. I was expecting to sell like 10,000 books right away.
Right.
What am I thinking? Absolutely not,
And you get the reality check that even the people that are on the New York Times bestseller list are selling like 500 copies.
Yes,
It's just not it's not what you think it
exactly. The
is. Yeah.
numbers the math starts to math, and you're exactly right. And then you start to realize, shit, I got to do this because I love it and because I
Yeah.
can't not do it. And yeah, but I do think that's a really important lesson for people who are trying to do this is you just got to keep going. And my other second piece of advice in that realm, go to conferences. Like if you're published, if you're self-published, if you're traditionally published, find other authors, because I have made so many connections that way, and people who I know would vouch for me, people who I know would help me, people who are supporting my career because they've become friends of mine.
Right.
And because we get it, like you can be in a part of a supportive community, family, but until you're surrounded by people who understand what you're going through, then that is like where you find your people, your
Yeah.
place.
I think you're right about that. Saying yes, like everybody wants to be in a position where they can say no, but like unless you're, yeah, at that
No.
point, you have to say yes. I feel the same way in my stuff. I feel like I'm in a position even, yeah, with my writing, with podcasting, I just have to say yes. Like I'm like, oh, I'm not in a position where I can say no. And it's like, yeah, I'd love to be in a position where I could say no in the
Yeah.
podcasting mode, but it's
Yeah.
no, it's every opportunity, every little thing. And you never know what can happen. You never know what can happen
Yeah.
if you just say yes, to these things. And yeah,
And our clips are going to go viral of this, and then
exactly. Yeah.
you're going to be the next Joe Rogan, and I'll be
Right.
the
Yeah.
next
The
Colleen
Joe
Hoover.
Rogan of literature. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Love him or hate him, you can't argue that he's doing pretty well.
Yeah. 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 Of course. I think he gets like 60 million downloads a month or something. Where
Crazy.
I'm in a small fraction of that there. Yeah. A few thousand. Yeah. A
You
month.
and me
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
I don't care, because I love having conversations with people like this,
yeah.
because it's genuine, it's real, and it does feel like I do feel as if I learned something new about myself and about my story and about others, that is makes this fun. Like you have to find the fun in it too, and that's what kind of keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Quick question before we move on to the craft stuff. You're a dog person. It's in your bio. So
I'm a
I always like
dog.
to ask. I always like to ask dog people. Dogs versus cats, which is better?
You're asking me at a vulnerable time, because we had to put our dog down
Oh, I'm
right
sorry.
before our third baby was born.
Oh,
And so she was like our soul dog. Ugh, I miss her.
right.
But then at the same time, I have not personally had a cat in our house, because my husband still says no. I will break him down. We will eventually get a cat. Um, but when we can actually care for another creature and keep another creature alive, because we're just right now, with our current state of having a newborn. But I would say no. I will not choose. I will not choose.
Okay, good.
Because I've had really amazing cats, and people are so anti-cat, and it's like, no, if you have a great cat, and kind of you call them a cat dog because they're like dogs, then they're like the best of all things, because they're so low maintenance, but they're the best.
Yeah.
So, but then once you have a really good dog, man, there's nothing like it. Nope, I will not answer. I will not choose. I plead the fifth.
Yeah, that's always interesting. I say it's an easy one for me, but
What are you? Are you a dog person?
oh yeah, dogs are
Yeah.
better than cats. Yeah. I used to, when I was teaching college, when I would go over thesis statements, I would do this kind of joke where I would say, okay, so a thesis statement, you have to have an arguable statement. So if I say, dogs are better pets than cats, I'd write it
Uh-huh.
up on the board, and then I'd turn and be like, well, that's not a good one because it's just true. It's not arguable. And like maybe one or two like 18-year-olds in the room would laugh, but like most of them wouldn't even understand that I was like making a joke or like saying that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, you say that very definitively, and I can't say that definitively. So I
I
will not.
said, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, let's go into the writing questions here. These are all kind of craft routine, all of that stuff. So we like to ask writers that come on, what is your writing routine like? How do you like to do it? You a morning writer, afternoon? You like to type? How do you like to do your writing routine?
I do not have a routine right now, because I am not able to have one. Because when I was able to write the most, and I did not have a family, I wrote every day after work, and I wrote on the weekends, and I got in the time that I could. Having children, I find my best time to write is on the weekends, because my husband could be with the kids for a dedicated chunk of time that
Right.
allowed me to get into the headspace and into the world that I needed to in order to write successfully and the story successfully. That might be different with this book that I'm writing because it's not quite as dark. Um, but I really needed that. I was not able to just like jump in and out of the writing. I've never really been that type. Maybe that will change with time where I can kind of jump in here and there and write for an hour and then go work for an hour, or things like
Yeah.
that. Like I usually kind of need to like get in the zone. So that also could be because I'm so overstimulated and there's so many distractions right now.
Right.
But that's kind of my answer, even though it's a non-answer, is that like I'm unfortunately not really able to have like a consistent routine. But I do think it's really important to be honest with myself about that, because even though I'd like that, it's just not something I'm able to do. And so I'll be setting myself up for disappointment if
Right.
that's my expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. And for listeners that don't know, Claire is doing this 3 months postpartum, so she is
Yeah.
which elevates her to sainthood status here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to keep a routine when you have a baby that constantly needs to be fed on the breast, blah blah blah. And
Yes,
so
the
it's
nursing is
yeah,
no joke.
yeah.
And yeah,
Every 2 hours until
every
they're,
two hours, every 2 to 3 hours. Yeah.
so
Yeah. And
that takes a
regardless
lot
of
of
whether
time.
you're
Yeah.
breastfeeding or not, then the baby still needs to eat.
Hmm.
So every 2 to 3 hours. But I don't think I'd be able to do this if it was my first or maybe even my second. But
Right.
because it's my third, I feel like I was able to jump back into life a lot more quickly because you don't really have the choice when you have got two older kids.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
It doesn't rock your world quite as much.
yeah, and I was curious about that because it's something I was going through too. Yeah, I mean, I have a child here, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there was one of the things that I did struggle with the first maybe 6 months, and then you kind of get into a groove with it.
Yeah.
The work, right? It's just you have to get used to the work of it, and then once you're adjusted to what the work is every day, it's like okay, now you can fit things. And at least for my first child, it was like, okay, it was quite a different, a lot of work that you have to learn how to do every day. But then you get used to that and it's like, okay, just part of what you do every day. And now you can fit in an hour or something when they go to bed
Yeah.
at night or something. So it's good that. So I'm just curious about that. Yeah. How you do that, especially, yeah, as a nursing mother or brand new mother, right? 3 months postpartum here.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I mean, I'm wonder if you're even able to think clearly, your lack of sleep
I
type
I
stuff.
do
Yeah.
feel like I'm not. Like I still feel like
Yeah.
forming sentences is hard.
Right.
So
Yeah.
forgive me, listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But hormones, quite literally.
right.
I think also with each phase of life like this, you prioritize things differently and you just are ruthless with it.
Yeah.
And the days that I prioritize one thing over another, well, that means, okay, I'm not able to work out today or get exercise. It's like I'm constantly having to choose this or that. Like you can't be
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll work out and then write and then make myself a latte. Like, nope, nope, nope. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's one of those things usually, if that.
Right.
And so constantly asking yourself, like, what do I need? And I think when I was writing the first and the second book, I was not prioritizing my like physical health and maybe even my mental health.
Right.
Um, and so for me this time around, like I know I have to prioritize that. Like now that we're done having kids, like I need to make sure I'm mentally and physically strong. And so that needs to come first over like writing and sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing we like to ask here for writers is how do you make a living? Do you make any money off the literature? And again, we don't need any specific numbers or anything like
Yeah.
that. But, we ask this because it's tough out there for writers right now. So do you make anything off the literature? Do you have a day job or spouse or something that, yeah, I mean, we just ask this for like the practical realities of being a writer right now
Yeah.
is you're not going to make a living. And yeah, I don't know. How's that been working out? Do you make any money off the books or?
I think it's really important to talk about because I don't think it is enough. So it's
Right.
very hard for authors and writers to really understand the extent of like how little money you do make, especially when you have retailers that are taking a big chunk of the book and selling the book for you and whatnot, and the printing costs, etc. But I make I make like an income that would be enough to for like fun things, if that makes sense. Like
Like,
it's like supplemental. It's not, but it's
right,
not enough that could ever support myself, my family by any means. Um, and I have not made a return on the hybrid investment.
right,
So the money that I put into publishing the book. Now I went with a hybrid publisher that's very expensive because I knew how good they were. I did a lot of research before I chose them. So I knew, to your point, this was going to be a long investment. Like this was going to be something that was able to like jumpstart my career, and it has done that. But I haven't been able to like make the money back
right,
yet. But like I think it's almost more important to kind of talk book sales numbers. And so I would say, like, I'm trying to remember because it's pretty quick. Like with the Rising Order, I've sold maybe, I would say, like between all across all formats, audio, ebook, and hardcover, I would say I sold like maybe like 2,000 copies. And that's like with me like grinding,
yeah,
hustling, you know, book clubs, doing whatever I could, bookstores. I would say, yeah, 2,000, maybe a little bit more. Um, and like that doesn't translate into an income that can support yourself
right,
or a family. So I have a part-time job now. I took the whole year and a half off from when the book first came out because I couldn't do a full-time job and have two young kids and then also promote the book. So I took like a year and a half off, and I just recently started this past May, right before my son was born, a job, and I'm running the marketing for a startup, and it's part-time and it's remote, and it
right,
checks so many boxes for me because it kind of allows me to get a steady, reliable income
right, yeah,
writing the next book that I write.
right, yeah. So we
Yeah.
always have to ask, and listeners like to know, yeah, because I think that is the reality. That is the reality. Unless you're in the top 1% of,
Yeah.
authors that are household names, even if you have a bestseller, you have to have a day job. So it's just
Yes.
not, that's just what it is right
Yes.
now.
It is. It is what it is right now. And I wish it was different. I truly do because, but even when I was, for example, like took that quote unquote year and a half off, I was promoting the book and marketing the book. Like I wasn't even able to like write full time. I
Right.
was writing a fraction of the time.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
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 I mean, that's what it is. It's a grind. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say some people even argue that the glory isn't even worth it anymore because it's almost impossible to get.
I know.
And
And
it's
I feel
less
like
than
it
it
comes at like
was.
an
Yeah.
insane cost too. It's like, okay, I want enough money where I can, but I don't want to be it like where it's like this insane expectations. Like for
Right.
example, not to keep talking about the Fourth Wing author, but Rebecca Yarros. Like, I think she suffered a huge amount of stress because
Right.
of how she was just catapulted into fandom,
And
and
that affects
different
your
level of
writing. Yeah.
it affects your writing. It affects your daily life, your stress, your family life. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what she would say to that kind of question. I wonder what she would.
Yeah, I mean that's just the reality of it. So we just like to, yeah, our listeners are curious about that. It's always interesting. The
Yeah.
last couple questions here, Claire. We like to ask, are you reading anything good, watching anything good, listening to anything good? And this can be anything you want. This could be, trash reality TV. This can be high-minded literary,
Yes.
whatever it is. Anything that's filling up your head with entertainment, watching, reading, listening.
Okay, so I am watching, I'm not doing a reading right now, which I feel like summer's too hard. Like you expect summer to be a good reading time. Nope, not when you have young kids who you
Right,
can't take your eyes off of them at the pool. Not there yet. Hopefully in a few years I can be sitting on the beach on the chair reading my book. But
right. Yeah,
took a hiatus over the summer because the kids weren't in school. And then I was having a baby. But I am watching The Summer I Turned Pretty on Amazon. Love it. I am watching Terminal List also on
okay.
Amazon, which is being produced by Jack Carr, who wrote the first one with Chris Pratt in it, and it's really good. And God, I always love a Real Housewives on Bravo. Real
Yeah.
Housewives of Salt Lake City. There's some juicy drama on that. So
Salt
I
Lake
kind of like
City.
flutter back and forth between the three, but unfortunately, I like by the time we get the little baby to bed, it's so limited. Oh, and Great British Bake Off, my
Yeah,
favorite on
yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of what I'm dabbling in right now in terms of shows when I can.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. And
Yeah.
then the final question, Claire, what are you working on now? You said it's another novel, but what's taking up your
Yes.
creative energy? Yeah.
I'm writing a novel called Golf Wives, and it is going to be like a juicy drama that is inspired by it's going to be like a Big Little Lies meets Netflix Full Swing documentary that kind of follows like professional golfers around, but it's going to be about like from the perspective of the wives, and it's going to be set in like a golf club setting. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, that was all I had. I mean, this has been fantastic. Please come back. Handles, websites. Where can people find your website, your social media handles? Where do you want people to go? Oh, this is all going to be linked below as well. But yeah, where do people go to find you?
Yes, my website is just claireisenthal.com, Isenthal. And all my social media handles are pretty much at Claire Eisenthal too. But you can find the links to all of those on my website, as well as the links to my books. So yeah, thank you so
Fantastic.
much for having me. This was a blast.
Of course, of course. Please come back. Yeah, anytime. Whether you want to promote something, you just want to talk, anything like that. Yeah, we love having writers on. So please, yeah.
I'd love to.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
I may say the male is entirely hostile.
You know.
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.